Blog Talk Radio.
For some of our brothers and sisters, it's already said and done. They don't have a thing in the world they can say right now. They left us behind as they went on to get their reward, and we have got to make sure that their sacrifice was not in vain. If you want to call in, the number's 929-477-3565. Again, that's 929-477-3565. I'm your host, James. I'm waiting on my buddy KC to get back. He's on hiatus. He'll be out of town for another couple of days, I think. Praying he comes home soon. He's still sitting down in Brownsville, Texas, down in that little hellhole they call the Cameron County Jail. He got to see his wife today. God bless him. I hope everything's going well with them. Later in the show tonight, we're going to have a call in, I hope, from Mr. Gary Hunt. He said he had some information and some stuff for us to talk about. I hope so. There's a lot going on in the country right now. When KC went down to the border, he was exercising his right as an American to stand up for his state and for his country when that federal government and state government would not. The federal government would not. They had made a mandate to their Border Patrol to let them through, bring them into custody. Let's see how far we can go before we can break this bitch. Well, he and a bunch of other like-minded patriots went down there, and they set up their own Border Patrol right there on the river in Brownsville, in that little 3.5 mile stretch of river. Crime rate went down 80%. Illegals had to go somewhere else. The main crossing point for human trafficking was pretty much shut down, and they had to find other places to go. He really pissed off the cartel. All them boys down there pissed off the cartel so well. They did such a good job. You'd be proud of them, and you should be proud of them. And he was rewarded by the federal government throwing a trumped-up charge of felon in possession on him when everybody knows that he was not in the Commission of Commerce. Yep. That bridge had already been crossed. It was already on the pavement on the other side, and there was no way that charge should ever be applied to anybody that way. Now we've got another situation where it's not the Border Patrol that has had their hands tied and been given a mandate that never should have been given, that is detrimental to our country and to our nation. He's told, man, I can't even say this too easy. After our courageous recruiters were mercilessly gunned down in 2 separate places in Chattanooga, Tennessee, he has told them, don't arm yourself, don't get prepared, don't defend yourself, pull the blinds, take your uniform off so they don't know who you are, play chicken shit. It doesn't fly with our Marines. It doesn't fly with our Navy. It doesn't fly with our Air Force. It doesn't fly with any of our service branches, and the Army sure as hell ain't putting up with it. So because, like at the border, the federal government is not protecting its citizens or its military, tying their hands, making it to where they're nothing but sitting targets in a gun-free zone. Everybody knows what a gun-free zone is. It's nothing more than a shooting gallery for the mentally deranged. Our patriots, our American citizens, are at these recruiting stations now, armed. They aren't drawing Mohammed. They aren't flying the stars and bars that Johnny Reb flag. They're protecting our servicemen at home because they're not allowed to protect themselves. Have you ever heard of anything so asinine? Well, that's the way the governor of Texas and a bunch of other states felt when they told the National Guard to go ahead and arm up and don't be sitting ducks down there. And for all the other states that haven't had the foresight, foreskin, however you want to look at it, to do that, the nutsack, our citizens, our American citizens, are standing guard. Our American citizens have posted up outside these recruiters' offices and said, you got to go through me first to get to them. They're returning the favor to our servicemen that have given so much overseas, that have put their lives on the line time and time again for us, only to come home and have their own government make them sitting ducks for the same terrorists they were fighting overseas. They're on our shores now. ISIS claims it has over 75 or 76 fighters and all across the United States ready to commit jihad. Yeah. I say ban the Quran. I'm not one for banning books. I'm not one for putting down one religion over another or anything else, but it seems like that one little piece of history continues to cause the deaths of men, women, children for no other reason. And some goat fucker said, do it. Oh, man, I messed up. I said the bad word. I said the F word. I should have said goat humper. I'm sorry. Another dollar in the... Shoot, that's going to be a big one in the coin jar. Yeah, you would just throw them in there. You know you deserved it. I'm trying to do better, folks. I understand that we have another... we have been picked up by a Christian broadcast to be rebroadcast, and I want to say thank you to them, and I want to apologize beforehand. My words and my language are not for polite company, so you may want to not let the kids listen to this. Donald Trump has been making some plain speech, and he hasn't been using curse words. You'd think he had been, the way that the media has been crawling up his keister. All he's been doing is telling the truth about a man named John McCain. John McCain never did not admit to what he did in the Vietnam War. He did admit to hot dogging and flying under some wires and knocking out a power grid for a couple of days in another country. His class scores weren't all the best. Hey, he passed. He was a flyer. When he was shot down with ACAC fire instead of a SAM, he went on later and pulled a little Brian Williams and said, well, maybe that's where Brian Williams picked it up from, and decided to say that he was shot down by a SAM instead of straightening it up at the point where it started and saying, no, man, it was ACAC. I was flying low. He didn't do that. He just let it just keep on percolating and perpetrating. Now it's coming back and biting him in his political butt. And people are crawling all over Donald Trump for bringing it back out and dusting it off and showing it for what it is. Oh, that was way back then. He's not like that now. Well, a lot of people change with time, but apparently Mr. McCain hadn't. He's had all the opportunity in the world to make a difference for our veterans at the VA, and he has not done that. He's had all the opportunity in the world to make a lot of differences in a lot of places, and he hasn't done that. He did get ISIS some new toys to play with, courtesy of Uncle Sam. Did Mr. McCain know that the people that he was meeting with at the time were the top brass of ISIS, or all that kind of stuff? I can't say. How would he not know? Everybody else did. Who trotted him off down through there and said, you're fine. These are good guys. Well, whoever did it, they really did it good. Because he's got his picture plastered up there with people in the room from ISIS and from all these other terrorist organizations. And what were they thinking in the first place? Giving anybody over their arms. They get done killing each other, they're still going to try to come kill us. The Iran nuclear deal, look at that. Yeah, look at it. Oh, yeah. Good idea. Let Iran get the bomb. Oh, we're keeping them from doing that. We're going to have on-demand inspections just as long as we give them 24 days notice. Ain't no big deal. It's like, telling somebody on parole that you're going to give them a drug test in 3 weeks. What good does that do? None. We know that. How much of a dink does he think that the American people are that he can get away with that? Apparently pretty big dinks, because he sure is getting away with it. And he's not just going to get away with it and trot it to Congress, and Congress going to stomp all over it and say no. He's taking it to, of all places, the UN. Yeah, where you've got countries like Iran on the councils and that for human rights violations. Iran is on a council that determines who's committing human rights violations. These are the same people that are mutilating young girls, cutting off their components to make them more Sharia compliant. I don't think that's good. There was a Texas senator that didn't think that was good either. He started his own little war over there. Look that one up. There was a movie made out of it. Tom Hanks actually played the guy. Now look it up, see what it is. His first name was Charlie. Anyway, he was another Texan, and he sat on a couple of high-powered committees and could shift funds where he wanted to without any question. There's a lot of that going on in Washington. Then when somebody like Donald Trump pulls it out and dusts it off and puts it out and shines a light on it, they want to holler foul. He didn't have any business doing that. He shouldn't have brought up Mr. McCain's record. Why not? If Mr. McCain's that ashamed of it, let him resign. But you see, here's the thing about Mr. McCain's record. It didn't all come out at once. It dribbled out over 10 and 15 years because people in the military were not allowed to talk about the military while they were serving. That's why John Kerry, when he testified in front of Congress in his fatigues, didn't have any patches on. But the implication was there. John Kerry, John McCain, and then you've got little Hanoi Jane. Lord, didn't she give us an earful. Talk about giving aid and comfort to the enemy. Well, that was then, this is now. Do you think John McCain should resign? Or do you think that he learned from his past actions and has corrected it and is an honorable man? Hey, I got 2 broken arms and a busted leg. I'm going to say anything you want me to. I'm going to do anything you want me to. The guy did over 30 broadcasts for the communists. I probably would have too. I'm a puss when it comes to pain. By getting in a panic and forgetting what he was doing, or shoot, you get ack fire that low to the ground, get your plane shot out from under you, and see if you remember to fold your arms in while the canopy's coming off and you're getting your butt blown out of that cockpit. I'm not faulting Mr. McCain. Not for that. But for what he's not done for our VA, for our veterans. He was a veteran, got screwed up. Just like other veterans, sometimes it was their fault and sometimes it was just their own ineptitude that got them blown out. It's not their fault. They were putting themselves in harm's way for the American people, for the military that they so proudly served in. Am I waffling on McCain? No. I understand him, though. But I don't understand what he's done since he's been back, and he's had the power to change things for the Veterans Administration to make things better for our vets, and he never did. I understand that his leading contributor is a communist. I'm going to look that up right now. I'm going to Google that and just see how far I'm wrong. I read that somewhere and I don't even know if it's true and I'm spouting it off. Well, let's just see what I'm going to go to the Yuppie Toolbox, otherwise known as Google, and I'm going to Google that. Let's see. Who is... Who is McCain's largest donor? And the Yuppie Toolbox says, top contributors to John McCain. Let's just see who it is. Well, that didn't help much. Let's see what the next one is. It's not an ad. Well, this goes back to 2008. We'll see who it is there. Wow. John McCain, Republican. Top contributors, 2008 cycle. Merrill Lynch, $354,570. J.P. Morgan and Company, $336,605. Citigroup, $330,500. Morgan Stanley, $264,000. Goldman Sachs, $234,000. AT&T, $211,000. USB, $192,000. Wachovia, $187,000. The U.S. Army donated $177,000. The U.S. government donated $235,000. U.S. Department of Defense donated $132,000. FedEx, $131,000. Got to make sure it's there on time. Greenberg Treurig, LLP, $124,187. Bank of New York, Mellon, $121,000. Lots of money. Lots of money. I cannot get over this. Second biggest contributor was the Clinton Foundation. I keep forgetting that I've got to talk while I'm reading. I was always told not to let your lips move up and down while you're reading. You can't see me, but my lips are moving, but nothing's coming out. Oh, man. It's just ridiculous. Any way you want to look at it. Well, somebody's calling in. 530. Let's see if they want to talk or if they just want to sit by. Five 308. Yeah. Is this Gary?
Yeah.
Hey, Gary. How's it going, man? Just kind of rambling on about old John McCain. What do you know good today, my friend?
Well, whether it'll do any good if he's elected or not, at least Donald Trump's waking America up.
Oh, absolutely.
Mainstream media and the government, they're trying to cover their tracks.
Well, yeah, they're trying to bury him. How dare you talk about a war hero? Okay, the guy cracked up 4 planes.
A lot of my Vietnam veteran friends are not of the same opinion of as the mainstream media and the government and the rest of the Republicans, except Cruz.
I agree. Seems like they're just doing anything they can do to slam Mr. Trump. And all he's doing is saying everything everybody else is saying out loud, except he's getting media attention where they shut the rest of us up. They can't shut him up because he's got more money.
Yeah, you can see everything he said on Facebook all the time in the Patriot circles, but it doesn't get the mainstream media, and because the government, the powers that be, let's see, we've got the military-industrial complex, we've got the banking and insurance complex, we've got the medical and pharmaceutical complex, and we've got the government mainstream media complex. Those 4 complexes are basically ruling the country.
Yeah.
I think the Muslims got in there somewhere. I'm not sure. I think it's just in the White House and about the administrative branch, but I guess there's a couple in legislative branch as well.
Was it George Soros that they said was, hang on a second, I'm going to fix something.
If you're talking, I can't hear you.
Yeah, that's better. Was it George Soros that they were saying was one of his largest contributors now?
I don't follow that shit. That's politics. Politics ain't going to change this country. Guns will change this country.
Oh, yeah, that's going to happen.
I mean,
they keep going down the road they're going on.
Well, it's past that point, The Gadsden flag, you have tread on me. Years ago, I redesigned it. It says, it said, don't have tread on me. And years ago, I redesigned it as, you have tread on me. Randy Mack used that on his radio show for a long time. But
that's a good sign.
I mean, we're far worse than the founding fathers were in this country, and we have been out-manipulated by mainstream media. But, people are waking up. The Tea Party people are going to be disenchanted when Trump might have 70% of the polls, but the Republican Party will never let him run on the Republican ticket, and that'll finally piss him off enough to say, well, politics ain't going to work, and maybe there'll be enough people that are willing to follow the example set 240 years ago, and
I guarantee you one thing.
Declaration of Independence.
There are a lot of people upset with our federal government right now telling our recruiters to draw the shades, hide in the dark, and take your uniforms off. They have actually gone out and gotten in front of these recruiters and are now protecting our military, our servicemen at the recruiting stations.
Right.
They're outside armed.
Be treating the recruiting stations, any off-base installation should be treated like an embassy with having a guard or two, armed guard or two at the door.
You'd think so.
I don't agree with arming the military, and there's a number of reasons why not.
Well, yeah, I don't either. Posse Comitatus and everything else comes into play there, and then we become vulnerable in another way.
Well, we begin appearing like a third world country too, with soldiers walking down the street with their rifles on their shoulders.
Exactly.
When I was in the Army, you could not go off base in a duty uniform unless you were, in a vehicle going home. There were certain circumstances you could, but you couldn't wander around. You couldn't go to the mall, go shopping, and things like that in a duty uniform. They were called fatigues back then. But nowadays, and we were proud of that. In Germany, we were proud of it because the German soldiers go down the street in duty uniforms all the time. And we just didn't do that. And, we didn't have to have KIN cards, national ID cards either. But, now we see soldiers all the time in BDUs. They're duty uniform, not their Class A's or dress uniform. They're in duty uniform. We had to be in Class A's or civvies to go off base. They go off base in the duty uniform, and that stepped us down to, let's say, second world countries. But if we arm them, we're at a third world country. level at that point, and will accept it. And hey, if I wanted to kill somebody, all I got to do is get a hold of a uniform and a military-looking rifle, go kill somebody, and everybody's going to say some soldier did, and I go change back to my civvies, burn the military clothes, and they're looking for a soldier.
Yeah.
Which creates, another sort of problem.
Well, it's the same tactic that most of them over in Iran and Iraq. But, they were fighting people that weren't in any kind of military clothing. They didn't, there was no way to designate who the combatants were, and they're hiding behind their own kids and stuff. Hell, just like Vietnam, sending their own kids up there to blow up with a grenade. Except they're taking it a little bit farther and packing them full of C4.
They're taking it a lot further than they did in Vietnam. There's a whole different kind of war, though. And, I've talked with people, too, and if we fight a war in this country to get our country back, it's going to be more like Vietnam than Afghanistan and Iraq. But the interesting thing about Afghanistan and Iraq is the fact that the people we're fighting over there are us. They are the patriots that don't want the foreign invader in their country, and we're fighting them. They're the patriots of their country.
Well, it's getting worse by the day. When our military has to be armed, and I'm not flip-flopping here, but when they have to be armed at home to be safe, and we have to go and stand in front of our recruiting stations and as armed citizens to protect our military here at home, it's gone far.
Well,
it's
the problem. It used to be they went after the prostitutes, but that wasn't very successful, so they started going after the Johns. Now, why don't we go after the Johns, the Muslims? The thing is, if you got snakes in your house, what do? Kill a snake whenever it tries to attack you, or do you get the snakes out of the house?
Or what do? Go live outside in a tent?
Get the snakes out of the house. The government has inferred that this is either workplace violence, the shooting of the 4 Marines and the sailors, workplace violence, or domestic terrorism. And I looked at the domestic terrorism list, and I didn't see Muslim, ISIS, or Islam on that list. So they're trying to use what happened there to denigrate the patriots, the constitutionalists, the Tea Partyists, the ex-military, the militia, the ones that are listed in the domestic terrorism list that the DOJ and SPLC put out. SPLC and DOJ, I should put it in the proper order. So they're trying to taint us because that happened. And then you've got a guy who waves a Confederate flag once, he burns an American flag, and he's wearing 2 South African flags, and he goes into a black church and shoots everybody up, and the Confederate flag's responsible. But then you got a Muslim shoots up the recruiting station, and, they're going to find somebody else to blame besides the goddamn Muslim. And the Muslims are the snakes. We need to give them out of the country. There's no such thing as a moderate Muslim.
Well, they're only moderate until they become radicalized, and from what they're saying, that it can happen to any Muslim at any time. He can be called on by his God Allah to go crazy. Okay, fine. You got that problem? Ban the Quran.
His blog, that's exactly what he said. The day before the shooting, he posted the only 2 articles on his blog, and both of them said he's going to do what Allah wants him to do. It's not ISIS, but we were Taliban a decade ago. Now we're after ISIS. We don't talk about ISIL, even though the government does. We don't talk about ISI. Apparently, it's Islamic State in Iran now. We just talk about ISIS, and if he's not tied to ISIS, then he's not tied to the bad guys. But the bad guys are the Muslims. And as far as the moderates have yet to say that anything was wrong with the shooting in Tennessee. So they're moderate only in that they're not carrying a rifle or carrying a bomb themselves, but they're not opposed to the actions that are taken under the dictates or the tenets of the Quran. And
and how can they want to
about Sharia law? And, I agree with some of Sharia law. Well, you were probably these are converts, and probably 10 years ago they believed in the Bible, and then somewhere they kind of started playing with the Quran, reading it in Sharia law, and they began accepting a little of it. Now, does that mean they're going to stop right now, or are they going to continue to extend the tenets of Sharia law that they believe in? They've already begun a path. And it's not going to stop, because it's going to get to the point where there's enough more radical Muslims that say, you either come along with us or we're going to cut your damn head off. And so once you're a moderate Muslim, you're stuck. You can't get out. It's like the gangsters, the mafia. They say you can never leave the mafia once you get in the mafia. And you can never leave Islam once you get in Islam. So there's only
feet first without your head.
There's only one way to go. And so unless they're stagnant and never change, they're going to eventually become a radical Muslim. It's just a progression. We all progress in everything we do. If we start studying electricity, we don't study, let's see, we got positive and negative. Okay, I'm done. I know everything about electricity. We keep learning. And these people are going to keep learning what they're studying, which is the Quran and Sharia law. And so the thing is, we got to get the snakes out of the house. Now, back in 1996, bin Laden wrote a declaration of war, which the federal government didn't want us to see, but it's posted on my webpage. Just, type in bin Laden declaration of war, and you'll get to it. And he basically said, you're coming over to Muslim countries killing Muslims. And we're asking you to stop. And, if you don't, we're going to take the war to you. And this is back in 1996, almost 20 years ago. And that's where we are now. They're bringing the war here because we keep the war going over there. I think we ought to get out of Muslim countries, and I think we ought to get the Muslims out of our countries. And that includes the Western countries, Sweden, Holland, Germany, France, England. Countries that have the Muslim problems. Kick them out. Man, they don't belong there. They don't fit. They want to bring their laws in. They want to make Sharia zones that you can't go in with a beer in your hand. Hey, beer is American tradition. Ale is a British tradition.
It doesn't fit in Western society, so they're going to try to get rid of Western society.
Right, and
that's what they're doing. And and when people wake up to the fact that, this past guy was going to a mosque and everything else, and if they wanted to be Americans, then why weren't they policing themselves and stopping this? Why aren't they actively saying, no, don't do this? They're not.
No, they don't. They will not object to what other Muslims do, no matter how radical. But, a couple of people have turned away from me on an article I wrote recently because I said I support Tim McVeigh because he was a patriot and he acted. But I've also said that if I were in charge of that mission, I wouldn't have done it the same way. I would have done it at night. But we turn against it. Well, I think the article is the Patriot Court, the Kangaroo Court, the Patriot Community. We turn against our own. If we can find one blemish on somebody that's done an outstanding job, like Kevin Massey, Casey Massey, he's done an outstanding job, but he smoked a joint. And a lot of people have turned away from Massey because he smoked the joint. They've turned away from McVeigh because he did it in the daytime and killed children, even though he explained why he did it. And that's posted on my page as well. And then I say that, McVeigh is really the first American patriot of the Second American Revolution because they took an act. It might be deplorable in the fact that children were killed, but in war, children die. And I don't condone him killing children. I do condone him going after the government building because the government building is the building of the enemy. So
that's that's your opinion. I don't hold that opinion. But that's what's great about America. That's what's great about America is that, as long as we're Americans and we can do American things and that, we have a constitution in that, and we can revert to that constitution and change the things that we need to change. I believe we can. I believe that not change the Constitution.
I'm going to read you the instructions. If you let me find it real quick. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. That's the instructions. When was the last time the Constitution was changed?
And here's okay. Keeping with the instructions, doesn't that mean everybody marching on Washington and physically taking those people that are doing this out and getting rid of them, putting them in jail, doing it that way? Or do you think that by blowing up a building, a government building, that's going to change anything? That sticks and bricks mortar ain't going to change nothing.
Well, that's not quite true.
The people that are in it are.
Why do we bomb government buildings in foreign countries? There's a reason for that, you know.
Other than to shut down their grid, to curb their control.
Well, the founding fathers passed an army, and they did encircle Boston. That was kind of easy because it was on a neck. There were no helicopters to get the British out. The British wanted to get it out on land. They had to come across a very narrow net that was covered by cannon. Otherwise, they had to go by ship or swim. So, we're not dealing with the same situation. Now, New York, we almost got our ass kicked, but Washington wisely got them out in time. We didn't mass a big army and go attack them. In fact, we did everything in the world to avoid that. We can't do that. There's 1 million armed law enforcement people in this country right now. I don't know how many more that are not law enforcement, like Park Service and all these others with guns, IRS. But when we look at those specifically law enforcement, there's almost 1 million. I mean, last time I ran to look for numbers, there was over 990,000 of them. Now, if we took 1 million people to Washington, let's see what would happen. I'm in California. Let's see. When I crossed into Nevada, unless I found a dirt road, they're more than likely they'd stop me at the border and say, "You got any guns?" I could lie, but if they found out I had guns, they'd probably stop me. They'd break my tail light, find some reason to give me a hard time. Most of the people would never get there. We can't tactically do that. It's fucking impractical. It can't be done in this world today. They have helicopters, they got drones, they got armored vehicles and everything. So how do we fight a war? Well, the people that fought the war in Vietnam were wise. They outsmarted the Americans. They didn't outsmart the soldiers. They outsmarted the Americans, including the government and the generals. They outsmarted them the same way George Washington won the war, by outsmarting them. So if we're going to take it back, there are two things that are necessary. One is to secure areas, and that's described in the plan. But if you take a big map of the United States, paint it all black, white dot appears over here, another one over there, and another one over there. White dots keep appearing. That's where people have taken ground and made a constitutional government within that area. And those grow, and eventually they begin merging, just like amoeba growing. But they become larger and larger, and each one of those is a problem for the government because they've got to set up a perimeter around them. They've got to have logistics and command for that. So 1 mile square, for example, requires a 4-mile perimeter. Now, I'm going to give you the background in what made me realize this. When I was on the Golden Hill Peguesic Reservation in Connecticut, they had about 80 state troopers surrounding the 105-acre reservation. So it was draining their resources. And so we could do the same thing. If we take a section of land, a mile square, a town, and surround and take that, they've got to cover that perimeter. They don't want us out. They want to contain us. They might not attack, but they want to contain us. Now, every time there's another white dot added to this 1 mile square, that's another 4-mile perimeter, another logistics, and another command center that need to be set up. So you got 50, 60 of these around the country. You've drained all the resources, and you got all the intelligent potential command leaders for those there's a lot of dumb people in the government. Most of them are. So the intelligent ones will be put out first, and pretty soon they'll run out of the intelligent ones, and you'll end up with dumb ones. And so you keep expanding your area until you connect with other areas, and then you keep expanding until you connect with other areas. That's the way we're going to get it back. Now, let's look at the tactic of destroying government buildings. If I work for the government building and government buildings start getting blown up, am I going to continue working for the government building in a government building? No. Sooner or later, I'm going to say, no, this is stupid. I'm going to end up getting killed if I keep working in this government building. So it creates a fear, and that's why we blow up, government buildings in Iraq in the first round. We were blowing up all kinds of government buildings. And non-government buildings, too, Chinese radio station or television station, a Ford truck factory, things like that. But mostly it was government buildings, barracks, things like that. Just administrative buildings, which is what the federal courthouse is. So it's a tactic that we learned from the federal government. When they go to war with the sophistication they've got, they set those cruise missiles, those $1 million missiles to blow up a fucking government building. They set the $120,000 smart bombs to blow up a government building. So is it a bad tactic? Because it discourages people from wanting to work for the government, wanting to go in those buildings. And all of a sudden, the government becomes dysfunctional because it can't function. So I don't see it as a bad tactic, not at all. And we've got to outsmart them because they've got the equipment, they've got the communications. We've got to, figure out how we're going to do things. We've got to outsmart them, but there are ways to outsmart them. But it's not going to come by sending 1 million people to Washington because most of them will never get there. And last time a bunch of soldiers went to Washington on a mission, it was called the Bonus Army. And the Army came in and tore them apart. Now, people say, well, the soldiers won't turn on us. But I'm guessing they will if they're on active duty. Very few are going to abandon their job, their responsibility, their buddies. And if they're told that we're going to go into this area here because they're manufacturing drugs, go in, kill everybody. We didn't find any drugs. Well, we thought there were drugs there. And I'll use Waco for an example. The reason the military was used at Waco was they were told that there were drugs there. I know some of the Davidians, they weren't even allowed a joint in there. But, hey, it works. All you got to do is lie a little bit, and you can get, if there's drugs in there, they're bad guys. So, we can expect that a lot of the military will be used against us as they were at Kent State, Ohio. So what are the tactics we're going to use? And now blowing up a government building is feasible. As I said, he took an action against the government, but he did it in the daytime. The government was hiding behind children because the government accounting office almost a year before, because that building was not built to the new standards of terrorist resistant, where they put sloping concrete, and there's always barriers that you can't drive in the front door. Usually it's quite a few steps up to the front door and everything. But that had glass windows right against the street level where the bomb went off. So they were told that the child daycare center should not be in there almost a year ahead of time. But the government didn't remove the children from safety because, hey, we can use that as an excuse if something happens. I don't know what the reasoning is, but they did not follow common sense and get the children out. And after Waco,
so do you think that they were actually hiding behind the children? Do you think that's why that they put children in that government building was to deter somebody from bombing it?
No, it's why they didn't take them out. Maybe they felt there was no threat, but the government accounting office had done an analysis of all the federal buildings, or all the courthouses at least, in the country, and said these are not safe against terrorist attacks, bomb threats, car bombs, things like that. But let's look at 2 years before. The children that were burned to death by the government were in their home. They were in their church. And they accused the Davidians of hiding behind their children. How can you hide behind your children when you're in your own home or your own church? But when the church, the parents are working somewhere and the children are in the daycare center, and they shouldn't be because the government GAO recommended they be removed, everything's set up for them, and they did hide behind the children, didn't they? Because the big emotional story there, the one that still carries, is, oh, Tim McVeigh, he killed a lot of children. If he hadn't killed the children, if he'd blown it up at night, what would your feelings be about McVeigh? That was a question.
That's a good question. That's a good question. If there had to be, if he'd have done it at night, and that, how would I feel about it? Let me think about that for a second. Let me ruminate about that. The federal government had been doing stuff. They'd done Ruby Ridge. They had shot, women and children. They'd burned women and children in Waco. Yeah, I'd have been pretty hot about that, and I would have said that was probably I don't think I would have condemned it. But that's not what he did.
He had contemplated doing it at night, but he explained in an article, Why I Bombed the Marab Building, which is on my page. Just type Tim McVeigh, Why I Bombed the Marab Building, and you'll get the article. He wrote it. They sent it to me to be published. And he explains it. He had thought of doing it at night at first, but he thought back to his time in Iraq, and it didn't matter if there were children there. If they wanted to blow
and here's that slippery slope. Here's the same slippery slope that's catching the Muslims, because I think, okay, if it was all right to bomb it at night, forget it being a government building and that's an act of war against our government. Okay, that was just a single thing coming out at the time, and there was not a physical war going on. He was trying to incite a war. If I sit there and say, well, hey, that's not a bad idea, then I'm doing the same thing as a moderate Muslim when I see one of my Muslim brothers going and shooting up a reserve station, going, same difference. That's the same slippery slope, dude. I'm not sliding down that. There are ways to go about this that don't entail that.
There are, and if let's say McVeigh hadn't got caught, and I met him and I found out he'd done it, I would chastise him, but I wouldn't condemn him. I would try and correct his ways. But we're fighting the same fucking war. When I was in Vietnam, we were flying right after I got there. I think it was the first time I went up with a pilot. And we were flying over, and there's a rice paddy. There's a guy down there in a rice paddy with his water buffalo, and he's doing whatever they do, plowing underwater, whatever they do. I'm not sure what they do. But he came around and fired some HE or Willie Pete rockets at this guy, trying to kill him. I said, what are you doing? He's not Viet Cong. He's in a free fire zone. So we had a free fire zone in Vietnam, and anything in that zone that breathed was a target, a justified target. But then we have situations like Lieutenant Colley and My Lai. And Colley got caught. Others didn't get caught. And those that knew that others were not getting caught but were doing pretty much the same thing that Colley did at My Lai, they might have detested the people for what they did, but they would still come and defend them if they were under attack, because we're fighting the same war. I didn't like what the pilot did, but we're fighting the same war. Now, the question is, to McVeigh, like me, the war began April 19th, 1993. I said on radio stations a number of times, I'm at war with the United States government. It's a Cold War now, but someday it will become hot. The difference between you and McVeigh is McVeigh went to Waco. He spent almost a week down there. He saw what was there. You didn't. You saw what CBS showed you, CNN showed you. I was appalled at that. I couldn't believe that our government would do that. All you got was a little looking through a toilet paper tube at the world view of it. But McVeigh got the view. He saw the 18-mile perimeter. He saw at the triangle there between 24, 21, the main highway and the road into Mount Carmel is a triangle. You can come in from either side. He saw police where you left the main road. He saw the checkpoint, the state troopers, Waco PD, Sheriff's Department, everybody. When you get past them, you get to BATF and FBI, and then they're all lined down the road to Satellite City. Talk about police state. There was no doubt of it. There were hundreds of people just protecting that one road entrance. You go to the Old Mejia Road entrance, and you got the same thing. You've got a roadblock, and you've got 20 or 30 guys there Some are sitting back in the trees in chairs. I wonder what they're doing there. Their rifles were pretty sophisticated, too. They didn't want anybody in and anybody out. And so the government has declared war on us. There's no doubt about that. They just tell us it's not, and we believe them. But that day, both McVeigh and I've never talked with McVeigh. I don't want to confuse that, but I know I've read the book that he authorized, and I've got the correspondence I had with him. And he and I both believe that we were at war with the United States government April 19th, 1993, unlike the rest of the people. Now, prior to the Oklahoma City bombing, too, I traveled around the country talking about Waco, and I didn't fly and I didn't stay in motels. I mean, I drove some of the time, and sometimes I took Greyhound bus and usually stayed in somebody's house, and they fed me. And, I went on a poor man's budget, not a rich man's budget. But I spent a lot of time with patriots at Denny's. Like one guy said, there wouldn't be a patriot community if we didn't have Denny's 24-hour restaurants. But in talking with them, they're all talking about blowing up a government building. So then McVeigh does it. Now, what turned us against McVeigh more than anything was a guy named Bowe and a woman, a female named Linda Thompson, because they were recognized in the patriot community. And they said McVeigh was a government agent and that he didn't do it, and this is all a sideshow, a false flag. But it wasn't. McVeigh did it. But the people shifted to believing Bowe well-recognized patriot. On the contrary, I know a lot about Grice, and he's not a patriot. He was probably working for the government when he was acting like he was with us. But so if McVeigh is a government agent, then we got to turn against him. And so we turn against him. That's psychological warfare. And the government's been playing psychological warfare, whether it be the pablum fees, we call them, the press conferences in Waco, where most of the press got exactly what the government wanted them to get and nothing more. They didn't.
Well, I've seen firsthand what the press does. I was with Massey down there on the border, and when there was a big push, it was the media was covering it, and they were talking about all these, unaccompanied children coming across the desert just to come across our borders to have a better life and that and everything. And they were going to have a protest at the border stations in California and in Arizona and in Texas and that, and they were going to shut the borders down. They were going to protest. They were going to put a blockade up.
That was Stacey Barth's deal. But
yeah.
Rob Chupp got involved in it.
Yeah, and what happened? Rob Chupp decided that they were going to go ahead and they were going to blow up one of the bridges. Oh, we're not going to blow it all the way up. We're just going to set a charge, and disable it for a month or two. Oh, fuck no, you're not, motherfucker.
Well, see, what he did with a few words is create division and destroy that operation. Now, remember, Casey later invited Stacey Barth when she tried again and invited her on his radio show and supported it without Chupp involved.
Exactly. If there's two ways to go about things, you can either go about it the right way or you can go about it the wrong way. What Chupp and them were trying to do, blowing up that bridge, was fucking A wrong.
Let me suggest an alternative to that I believe, though. Chupp wasn't intending to blow anything up. He wanted to call McVeigh a government agent. He wanted to distract people. He wanted to bring negative on it. And he did.
Yeah.
He didn't need to bomb. All he had to do was say it, and the effect was the whole operation that Stacey had put so much time in got shut down. It was just the words. He never had intention of anything.
He might not have, but somebody with a few more screws loose may have, and they would have had the perfect opportunity. And every one of us down there that would have been involved with that would have been colored with that same pen. And I'm saying
what
no.
A few words did. It destroyed an operation that had a lot of good potential.
It sure did, and I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that a bit, man.
Now, as far as
but when you've got people,
somebody with a screw loose, that can happen regardless. But they're not going to advertise. If they got a screw loose, they're going to do it. They're not going to talk about it, are they?
I don't know. Did Tim McVeigh talk about what he was doing?
No.
Did other people know that he was that he was packing that truck up?
But Chup did. Did you get the picture? Chup did.
Yeah.
He had no intention of doing it. He wanted.
But the persons that he told that to, he thought they were 100% on his side until they stepped up and said, "No, dude, you got to screw loose."
Well, they should have beat the shit out of Chup and just kept their mouth shut.
We couldn't get our hands on the little bastard.
But I think he told more than one person. I think he told a number of people. And now Stacy,
a number of people got. I guarantee you, a number of people got told, and you can thank Casey Massey for that. He stopped that bullshit down there.
Well, he did. I know, but the thing was, it was never going to happen. Now, if I was,
oh no, it was going to happen. I guarantee you, it was going to happen because when he conveyed what he was going to do to him and the way he was going to do it, there was no way it was not going to happen. And until Massey stepped up and said, "No, you're not going to friggin' do it."
Chup didn't have.
They were going to do it there in Brownsville, dude. They weren't going to do it at the main bridge. They were going to do it at some offshoot bridge. And that.
Did Chup have the materials and the expertise necessary to blow up a bridge?
No, I don't know. How would I know? But the point is that he could have. He was in a position to have had it. He was in a position for everybody to take him serious.
Because
that's the position he was in. He was in a position to do it. If he didn't have the resources or the know-how, then he should have said, "Man, I wish I knew how to do this," or "I did." That's not what he said, though.
Right.
That's not how he did it.
But if he wanted to shut down the border shutdown, all he had to do is start saying it was going to happen. And it had that effect. That's
no. There was a lot of other people saying no. I'm going to beg to differ. I'm going to beg to differ on that one.
Unless you can prove that he had the means, the C4 or whatever he was going to use, I'm going to say the same thing. That's what psychological warfare is. They didn't like what was being planned, shutting the border down because the international attention it might have gotten or anything else. Maybe even a potential for possible violence. Because they try to stop him. The point is, psychological warfare, I don't like this. I don't want it to happen. Let's feed the seed into the community that this is going to happen. How about Jade Helm? Which of the stories about Jade Helm is true? Come on, which one? I've got about 30 if you want to read them all.
I don't think any of them are true.
Well, what I can find out is Jade is an operating is a software program that's interoperability program. Right now, if information comes from Miami and there's something that has to do with Dallas, it has to go up the ladder and come back down the ladder. It could take weeks. It might never get where it would be valuable. The interoperability that's offered by the Jade software is kind of like Twitter in a way, because if I'm, say, the designator for any militia operations is MI, if I sign up for MI, anytime anything goes into the system that says MI, I get it. So I get the information right today, not 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years from now. Now, that's what Jade software is. Now, I don't know what the helm is, but to me,
the helm is where you steer it. That's where you steer a ship, is at the helm. If you're at the helm, you've got the wheel in your hand.
If that's what the helm is for. And I can't say that. You know, if they're using that as a descriptor on it, or if they're.
Well, it could be an acronym for a whole bunch of other junk.
Yeah, or it could be just Desert Storm, Desert Shield. They always have two words in an operation, and so they had Jade, so they threw Helm on it. But maybe there's something Helm, but I couldn't find anything on Helm. But
maybe it's Jade Helm Foobar.
If it's new application, they want to make sure it works before they put it in practice, because if they put it in practice, actually applied it, like arresting patriots and things like that, and it didn't work, if it broke down and they weren't getting the communications out the way they're supposed to, they screwed the pooch. They've given us what they're doing. And so they're going to do an exercise, kind of a dry exercise with it, get the bugs out, and then they'll be have it on the shelf, ready to use, knowing it'll work.
I agree with that. I agree that they would do that.
That's not most of what you read about Jade Helm. the red list, the blue list, all those lists they're talking about, and they're going to pick them up, and all this other stuff. What it appears to be, though, too, is also a mobilization to the southern border in case there's an invasion from Mexico. Because look at the states that they've picked. They're along the southern border. So I don't know what it is, but when I go back and read all the stories for the last, and another curious thing, why did they put it out 2 months ahead of time to see what the Patriot reaction would be? That's psychological.
Exactly.
Too. But all the stories.
Well, they wanted to see how we would coordinate against something like that.
Right. And our coordination at this point, the only practical one is a rigid observation and sharing of information.
And that's going on.
Right.
And even the Texas governor even got the state militia, the state guard, which is the state militia, which is completely separate from the Texas National Guard, overseeing it or talking to him back and forth about it, and that's keep an eye on it. And I guarantee you, they never thought that would happen.
Well, I don't think they did either. But quite frankly, Jade Helm is anti-American, is un-American to do that. But the thing is, all the stories come out first. One, they're going to get all the Patriots, all the Tea Party people. How many stories were there?
Oh,
but see, that's what psychological warfare is using words to have the effect that you can't have otherwise. And that's what I think the thing with Chup was. There's no reason in the people I've talked to believe that Chup had any access to the explosives he would need to blow up a bridge. Now, that includes Casey.
Well, I don't know, because have you seen on YouTube the guys using those explosive targets?
Yeah, but you couldn't blow a bridge with those.
20 pounds of it, you can make a big enough noise.
No, you can't. Those are, what do they call it? Same as McVeigh's bomb, except McVeigh's bomb was a hell of a lot bigger. They create a concussion. They move a lot of air. That's what they do. They move air. They move things.
Yeah, and what was some of the stuff that they found?
They don't have the high bristance, the high velocity of air that's necessary to begin damaging concrete.
No, it may not damage the concrete, but it's sure as heck going to cause one heck of an incident down there. And nobody's going to know what the damage was until it was inspected and after the ensuing chaos.
A lot of noise and a lot of smoke. That's all. With what do they call it?
Have you not seen the guy that got killed by standing too close to the car that he blew up with that stuff?
Well, a car is kind of interesting because if you contain the explosion in the car, this is how they make firecrackers. They wrap it in newspaper and a little bit of gunpowder. All of a sudden goes bang.
Did Chuff have opportunity? Did he have an access to a compound that would complete his mission to his satisfaction? Yeah. Did he have the knowledge and know how to use it? You can go to any gun store and buy it.
I asked a number of people at New Chop, and they don't believe that he had it. They think he was just, I think he was working for the government, trying to plant a seed out there, or his ego got in the way, and he wanted to act, or maybe he said it, hoping some people would come to him with C4 and what he needed to really do the job. But I think it was more his ego. I mean, when I looked at Chop, he's an egotist.
And well, here's the other thing. He could have been trying to be a lightning rod to draw somebody to him that did know how and did have access to the C4, and that as a government agent to put his hand or put his eyeball on them to see if they would step up. If they had a screw loose far enough gone to step up and do that. So you want to say he's a provocateur and working for the government. Hey, what was this other guy's name that was doing that? And then he come out to the Patriot community and said, oh yeah, I was working, to be a lightning rod to draw the nut jobs to me so we'd know who the crazies are.
Kessler.
There you go.
Right. And see, the thing
so is Chuck following Kessler's footprints?
Well, I don't know. Let me tell you how I look at something like that. First, you look at what happened, the first picture. And then what are all the possibilities? And then you've got to start pursuing those possibilities. What is Chuck's character? Does he have the experience? Does he have the military training? Does he have access? you have to start looking at everything. And, it wasn't worth pursuing. My concern was I helped Stacy get the second event. It bombed, but she for her satisfaction, she wanted to have it go. So I got her in touch with Casey to go on the radio show, and, he gave his blessings to the second round. But, it's not something that Chup is not on my list of people that I'm investigating. So I looked briefly at it. But everybody I talked to that knew Chup, he's basically an egotist. And so...
Have you ever met Rob?
What?
Did you ever meet Rob?
No. I just talked with him. And not talked with him, talked about him with people.
Oh.
But that's the
I got to see him. I got to see him firsthand.
Well, that's the impression I got from the people that I spoke with. I didn't know you then, so I didn't talk with you. But
no, you wouldn't have known. Shoot, I was just a BOG, a guy on the ground, and when that stuff started up down there and that kind of stuff, and then he finally did make an appearance down there. No.
But then, I wrote an article called Vortex. What's the vortex? That's the point that some misinformation enters the Patriot community. The whole article, Vortex, is about how it's done. And so let's go back to something that we're all, to some degree, familiar with. It was called a drone attack at Bundy Ranch.
Oh, my.
Now, interestingly, the guy that passed the information on to... Stuart Rhodes, and I forgot who the other person was at Waco, but he was more on the Patriot militia side than the Oath Keeper side. Mr. X, I called him in the article. When I talked with him, after I talked with him, and I went into detail in my discussion. I got an hour and 45-minute interview, and there were some questions that the Oath Keepers, when they interviewed him, didn't ask that would be logical questions. But when this whole thing is done, there are a lot of possibilities still. One of those possibilities, and the one that's most logical to me, is the Oath Keepers got somebody to feed this guy the information to put it out so they could have a reason to leave because they'd not been able to take overall command. Now, that is the most plausible with all the things I've investigated. But where does Mr. X come into this? I looked into Mr. X, and I see that he passes on some good information, and he passes on just Patriot mythology. I'm sure he has some Jade Helm stuff out and all this. So he gets something and he likes it, he passes it on. He becomes a vortex, maybe unwittingly. So a guy that he worked with, according to him, contacted him and told him about this drone strike. And so he started passing it up the ladder on our side. That's the vortex. So the government planted the seed. Now, did Oath Keepers have somebody plant the seed with him so they could back out? That's my guess, because they were so quick to jump ship. But I don't know. I can't prove that. But that's when you look at all the possibilities, and some come out stronger, and others just aren't plausible. And so back to Chup, I can't find anybody that believes that he has any means of getting any explosive. So that leaves the other alternatives, and it could be that somebody suggested that he say that. Let's go back to Linda Thompson. Back in '93, she first started calling me a government agent. Before that, we'd worked together. People said, do you think Linda Thompson's a government agent? I said, I don't know. I have no idea. But if Linda Thompson's not a government agent, I would guess that somebody close to the government is also close to Linda Thompson and feeding her stuff. So she knew I wasn't a government agent. Boy, we spent hours together. We filed things with the court together on behalf of Koresh, and she knew I wasn't an agent, but for some reason she wanted to come out. Maybe she wanted to climb up. Some people suggest she wanted to climb up my coattails and stomp on me, push me down to build her up. Others suggested that she was madly in love with me and was shunned, the woman shunned. And I don't know what it is, but I know a few years later I had arranged a meeting with her to try and stop the name calling, and she had agreed to the meeting, but she was a no-show. And it was the same night that I found that the Indianapolis engine repair station was still an engine repair station, because one of the waiters at the restaurant we were supposed to meet at, we heard us talking about Thompson. He came over and started talking to us, and he was laughing. He said, I work there in the daytime. It's an engine repair shop. There's not a FEMA camp. But that one's still on the FEMA camp list, by the way. And this is 20 years
Wow.
later.
Maybe it is now.
I went to 5 of the FEMA camps. Well, I doubt it. I went to 4 of the FEMA camps back then. And the 5th one a friend went to and took pictures. And none of them were what they said they were. And, the new list, there was one that up in Washington that they said was a FEMA camp. And I went on Google Earth and found it. And then I went to Street View and looked at it. It's not a FEMA camp. Those are damn, garage-type buildings. They look like barracks from the top, from the aerial. But when you get down to ground view, they've got the roller doors on them, the garage-type roller doors on them. That's not very suitable for containing large numbers of people, because the works on those doors is on the fucking inside, isn't it? The overhead roller doors, they roll up.
Well, there are some of them. But see, there's some of them that are actually mounted on the outside.
These were mounted on the inside because all you saw was the plane of the door. There was no reel up on top of the door. It was just you saw the framing around it and the door. Hard to believe it's a FEMA camp, but even so, why would you have all these doors if you were going to put people in there? You just shove him in one end. Keep moving down. Come on until nobody can sit down. Keep moving. Keep moving. You don't need 60 doors or 20 doors on a building, especially drive-in doors. It doesn't make sense. Now, anything could be, my house could be converted to a FEMA camp for, maybe 15 or 20 people. If we played Mexican, we could probably get 40 in here. So, and every school, just every school in this country could be a FEMA camp. Every gymnasium, look at the hurricane in Louisiana, the gymnasium became a FEMA camp. So this claim about FEMA camp, I just never found any merit to it at all on the ones I visited. See, the rumors go in the patriot community, and they're very disruptive because people start putting their energy on FEMA camps. I don't care if there's FEMA camps or not. I care if they come to get me and put me in a FEMA camp, and they could make a FEMA camp out of the school down the road. I live out in the country. It's a mile and a half to town. The town's got a population of about 800, 900 people. But they could make a FEMA camp out of the fire station. They could make a FEMA camp out of the middle school or the high school.
The high schools, middle schools, junior high schools, anywhere there's a large building and a large open line of fire field, they can set a camp up. It doesn't take but about 20 minutes.
How long does it take to put a chain link fence up?
Well, exactly. How long does it take to string concertina wire? It doesn't. It's
FEMA camps. There's one near you. It might not be there now, but it could be there within 48 hours. It could be a FEMA camp.
Absolutely.
So I'm concerned about whether I'm going to get arrested, not about FEMA camps. What a waste of energy! All the conversation that goes on about fucking FEMA camps. Who gives a shit?
Well, if you wind up in one, at least you ain't dead yet. And the problem is it when they take you into custody, that's when the point of contact is going to go one way or the other.
Right, and like I say, the FEMA camp could be a mile and a half from here, out in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town of any size is Red Bluff. It's 15 miles north of me. Chico's 25 miles south of me. So I'm out in the middle of nowhere. But there's a FEMA camp right here if they want one. So, think of all the energy that goes into fighting about FEMA camps. What a waste of time. So the government would love to see us waste our time rather than put our heads together and look for a solution. Stayed helm 2 months early. There was probably to see the reaction, just like it did back in the 80s by cutting supplies of sugar, concrete, and things like that, to see what the reaction was. It was something described in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, or Quiet Weapons for Silent Wars, or something like that. But it was actually put into place in the 80s. A shortage of fuel, we had shortage of sugar, shortage of coffee. I think there was a shortage of peanut butter. There was, at least where I live, there was a shortage of concrete. But
there was a shortage of concrete in Texas. I can tell you there was a shortage of concrete in Texas, and that the price of concrete by the yard to pour went went through the roof. Everybody that had planned on building their buildings and getting on with their businesses and stuff had to reevaluate their cost sheet, their spreadsheets and that, and go, hell, we can't even afford the slab now.
Well, let me tell you what happened in Florida. I was a surveyor, and I was working in Orlando primarily, but I had a job over in Tampa, St. Pete area. I think it's about 85 miles from Orlando. And there's a shortage of concrete, people building houses. They couldn't even build the stem walls because, concrete block stem wall, then pour the blocks and then pour the floor was the standard building practice. And they couldn't get it, the trenches were dug and everything. They couldn't get to the concrete block. And I happened to go over to Tampa to work on the airport service center over there. And on the way, I can't think of the town now, is where they used to hand roll cigars in these big, big buildings. They had thousands of people rolling cigars there. But going by there, and I looked off to the right, there's a yard there. And there's a guy with a forklift, a high-lift forklift, trying to get another pallet of concrete block up about, I'd say they were probably 11 or 12 tiers high. I mean, this yard was full of concrete block, 85 miles from Orlando. But within a couple of months, concrete blocks were costing about 2.5 times what they were before.
Yep. They do the same thing with plywood. People will buy plywood like they do, stocks. They will go and they will buy up plywood and plywood futures. They'll have warehouses of plywood and CDX and that, and they'll hoard it up. Just like they did with ammunition and everything else. They buy it all up. They create a market where there wasn't one, and then they profit from it because they had it stored in their warehouse for 8 months. And plywood went from $3.16 a sheet to $15 a sheet.
And in a sense, that's economic psychological warfare. Now, the government does practice psychological warfare, and I mentioned some of them. The FEMA camps, they love to keep that going. Jade Helm coming out 2 months early, whatever the reason was, it's created a lot of controversy and I'm going to say tens of millions of man-hours in finding what Jade Helm is and arguing about, I'm right, you're wrong, and all this shit. So, back to Chuck.
And here's something that is
the possibility the words were put in to have a disruptive effect are very great. I've seen it too many times in the last 20 years.
What's happened on our borders in this last 2 months? You've got Border Patrol completely stood down, and that you've got the guys that are down there trying to do it. The Patriots that are trying to do it and doing what they can do about it. But now you've got the Border Patrol coming up and saying, and telling these illegals, well, here's how you can stay in the country, and that say somebody did something to you, and while the investigation's going on, whether it happened or not, while we're investigating, we're going to keep you here. We're going to pay for your housing. We're going to pay for your food. We're going to pay for your medical and all this other stuff. And at the same time, at the same time, they're hamstringing any sheriff. They're hamstringing any citizen down there, and that because no citizen wants to have to sit there under investigation for 8 months while they figure out that he didn't do anything anyway. After they have to spend the money for an attorney, bond fees, and all this other kind of stuff. It's non-kinetic warfare. They're committing this on us atrociously every day.
But if I had been down there and Chuck had made that claim, I think the thing to do would be to have the militias stand guard on the bridge and make sure that nobody even looked like they were going to go under the bridge to plant explosives.
And that was the way it was going. And that's exactly the way it was going.
But the thing is, it shut the whole thing down because, and so the effect that might have been desired by the government was had because it was shut down. They should have let the border shutdown go on, and the militia be extremely careful. Guard 2 or 3 days ahead of time. Start guarding the bridges, and that would have solved the problem without disrupting the original border shutdown plan. Stacey had a lot of time in that. She had a lot of people who were going to go, and they all got scared away because of Chuck. The plan was effectively dismantled because of one asshole.
Yeah, but I mean, you couldn't take a chance on him doing it. There was no way that anybody down there would have took a chance because
you can kill the snakes when they try and strike you, or you can get the snakes out of the house. In that case, the thing to do would be to guard the bridges. How do they do it in the military? They guard the fucking bridges to keep them from getting blown up. They can't go after who's going to do it. It doesn't matter if it was Chuck or somebody else. If they guard the bridges, they can stop it if they're diligent. The explosives have to be planted. The means of detonation have to be arranged, and everything.
Well, it's put together by heads a lot smarter than mine. I can guarantee you one thing, but there was one thing that was not going to happen, that nobody at Lone Star was going to be involved with it. And if we had any way to stop it or stop the person trying to do it, they would have been found. Well, they never would have been found.
Well, but my point is, we allowed what Stacy put her heart and soul into trying to get that operation going, which, if it had gone the first time the way it was intended without the bombs, it would have been very effective because it would have brought national attention to it. There's no way the press could not cover that.
Well, it's unfortunate now, but we've got national attention on it now with the and you know, if that girl's death in San Francisco brings about the end of sanctuary cities in the United States, that would be a wonderful memorial for her to end these sanctuary cities. And it needs to happen because these people that they're bringing in, that they're letting come in, these sanctuary cities and stuff, these these commie liberals that are doing this, they're destroying our country. And it's time to call them what they are. They are enemy.
California right now has a bill, I think it passed the House, to make California a sanctuary state. At the same time, in Congress, they're saying, oh, we need to do something to keep sanctuary cities from doing that. Now, immigration was given to the federal government, but the federal government hasn't been enforcing the immigration laws that they have on the books. So do you really expect them to tell the cities that they have to enforce the laws the federal government doesn't enforce? Ask Joe Arpaio if it works that way.
We know it doesn't work that way. And that's why patriots were on the border, and that's why it's getting to the point that it's at. This non-kinetic warfare, like you said, it's fixing to have to go hot. And don't worry about running out someplace and starting it. You won't have to. You'll see it when it starts.
Well,
you don't have to be the one starting. You'll see it when it starts. And it may be because of these people at these mosques have decided they're going to go full on jihad and start everything. And once they do, I guarantee you one thing: once the Americans have a target, they will take it out.
Is the government tyrannical now?
Is it tyrannical?
Yeah.
I'd say that the shadow government is completely tyrannical, and I'd say it's got a hold of the government so bad that the government doesn't know whether it's coming or going.
The one that charged Massey with felon in possession, the one that doesn't enforce the immigration laws, is it tyrannical? Is it doing what it wants to do, not what the law
Absolutely.
says it should do?
Absolutely. Okay. It is not following the Constitution. It is not following the laws. It is not upholding its oath to the people.
Okay. Tyranny results in despotism, right?
Pardon?
It's despotic. Tyranny results in despotism. It's despotic, right?
Yeah, tell everybody what despotic means. A lot of people out there, they hear despot. What is a despot?
Well, let's see. I don't know if my words would be good enough. Let me find a quick definition. I got an idea, but I don't want to err and say something wrong.
Right. That's one of those words that everybody hears every day, and I don't know if they actually know what the real meaning is.
Okay, a ruler with despot is a ruler with absolute power, a person who wields power oppressively, a tyrant. Okay, you got it? That's
okay. Now we don't have just one. We have a whole clown car full of the fuckers.
No, we have one, because the entire administrative branch of government or executive branch of government includes VATF, FBI, DEA, BLM, those, IRS. Those are all under the president. Now, why are they not enforcing the laws? Because he told them not to, right?
There you go.
Okay.
And he's just the face.
Like a despot. And his name is bastard president, Barack Obama. Now, despotism is a form of government which a single entity rules with absolute power. Now, he is sharing it with the Supreme Court right now, but we're about as close to despotism as Supreme Court's just a tool to allow the despot to have his way with queer marriages and things like that. I mean, they're ruling against the Constitution, Obamacare. They're ruling, whether he's got direct influence or they're just kissing his ass, I don't know. But basically, we've gotten to that point of despotism. So that's where the instruction says it is our right, it is our duty to get rid of that government. It is their duty to throw off such government. Now, how could you possibly throw off such government? Well, here's the instruction manual. That was the Declaration of Independence, and at that point there was no turning back from kicking the British out of the country or becoming slaves to Britain. So that was the point that the war was on. There was no backing out. Before that, they could have negotiated a settlement. Well, you take off the tariffs and the taxes and things like that, and we'll see what happens. But July 4th, 1776, when that was signed and made public and people cheered it, they made a commitment, lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. And not just the ones that signed it, but the ones that picked up a rifle. Now, when do we reach that point that the government under our Constitution as intended is worth us fulfilling the obligation imposed upon our posterity by both the Declaration and the Constitution?
I think we're going to have the same thing happen. I think we're going to have people come out and say,
"Man, it's happened." What
Where?
are you waiting to happen? They killed 80-some people in their church and home. They murdered a 14-year-old boy and then shot a breastfeeding mother to death. To name a couple. That was 20 years ago. Oh, that was ancient history. No, we've just accepted that condition for 20 years.
and look what that condition has brought us: sanctuary cities.
Right.
We have Mexican illegals. We have illegals running rampant, committing 90% of the crime going on. I read the statistics last week on the air, and it was unbelievable. That all the crime and 80% of the criminals in county jails and that are illegals. What the hell? Okay, Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, California. 80% of the inmates are illegals. And out of that 80%, something like 90% of those had committed violent crimes.
Okay, I'm going to go back in history again. This is about a month before Lexington and Concord. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, and that's what we're assuming, that we can't win this battle. They tell us we are weak, sir, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be next week or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and when a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we gather strength by irresolution and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging the elusive phantom of hope until our enemies shall have bound us hand and foot? What are we waiting for? What the fuck are we waiting for? Those young people now capable of fighting a war should be out fighting a war, making security teams, blowing up government buildings, preferably at night, taking the initiative, because right now the initiative is 110% in the side of the government, because all we do is argue. When some Tim McVeighs come out and start doing it nighttime, or even daytime, then we have begun a process of restoration of constitutional government. Until then, we are hugging the elusive phantom of hope.
Well, the Constitution is not an elusive phantom of hope to me. And I think that we have an opportunity with the next elections. We have an opportunity in these next elections, just like we did in the last elections, in the midterms, and that when we got rid of a bunch of stuff and we got a new set in there, and we're going to have to cull through them again. But thank God we got Mr. Cruz in there. Thank God we got Mr. Goldman in there from Texas. Man, we're rocking in that. There's a lot of states that are rocking with Scott and with a bunch of other people in that. But I'm concerned with Texas.
That's the elusive phantom of hope. You're talking right now about the elusive phantom of hope. We hope that Cruz and Trump get elected, and then the executive branch might straighten out. But Congress is still going to do what Congress does, and that's line their own pockets at the expense of us.
I have faith in the Constitution. I have faith in the United States because
Constitution, if it is,
and I have faith in God,
exercised as intended by the founders, but it's not. And I'll give you a good example. Do you know what habeas corpus is?
No, go ahead, tell me.
According to scholars, both before and after the creation of this country, it is the guardian of personal liberty, is the way to challenge the unconstitutionality of laws. It is embodied not in the Bill of Rights, but in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2. It's one of the few rights that's actually embodied in the Constitution, not the Bill of Rights. That's how important it was. I've taken a habeas corpus Supreme Court of the United States, and they refused to hear it. The District Court refused, the Appellate Court refused, the Florida Supreme Court refused, and the United States Court refused. They refused a right guaranteed in the body of the Constitution. In Billings, Montana, they refused to hear it. They used some technical thing. Oh, he didn't pay the $5 when the law says he's exempt from paying the full fee. So now it's in the appellate court in California, and right now it got there last Wednesday or Thursday, and I'm waiting to see what they do. But what Constitution are you talking about? Do you think we really have one? You can look at the Congress and the structure of Congress, but these guys, the Constitution, let me tell you what their salaries are supposed to be. The senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services to be ascertained by law and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. Compensation for their services. That doesn't mean compensation for the services today for the rest of their fucking life. Back then, they didn't have administrative staffs. You know, each congressman got $500,000 in budget and roughly a $200,000 salary. And he gets that salary the rest of his life. Look at all the other perks he gets. That's not received compensation for their services. Abigail Adams, when she moved into the White House, was concerned about the cost of entertaining in the White House. Lincoln's wife, or whatever her name was, I can't think of it right now, same thing. She said, we can't afford to entertain. The only dinners that were paid for by the government were state dinners. The daily food, the $6 million pizzas, had to be paid for by the president.
Are you there?
So they're not. They're well beyond what was intended by the Constitution.
Yeah, I got booted. Can you hear me?
Hear you. Oh,
okay.
You threw off the radio?
Yeah, I got thrown off.
Who threw you off?
Huh?
Who threw you off?
I have no idea. I don't even know how it did it, but I'm in the process of pulling the computer back up. I got thrown off, let's see, my internet service shut down. So let's see how. Yeah, that's that's okay. because I'm prepared for these contentions. KC prepared me for this. He said, dude, you got to watch out because the gremlins will get you every time.
Yeah, I
and,
wonder who those gremlins are.
Oh, it's probably just me.
No, the
But,
show appears dead.
Do what?
The show, let's see. There's no sound on the radio show. It's gone.
None at all?
No, it's
probably just me.
We're talking.
we're on the air then.
Yeah, we're on the air.
Oh, okay.
But the you see that that's one of the little tricks that I did. I have it. I'm not going to tell my trick.
Let's get back to the Constitution. What part of the
Absolutely.
What part of the Constitution is working? The election process is the only thing that works. But they're getting overpaid. They're spending money they don't have. The full faith and credit of the United States is unlimited, and it wasn't intended to be that way. I mean, you're just thinking we got elections, but you got Republicans dangling a turd on a string, you got Democrats dangling a turd on the string, and you're given a fucking choice. Ask Ron Paul 4 years ago. Ask, who are the other ones? The little guy from Texas.
Ross Perot.
Ross Perot, and there was one other one that ran and had a good, high popularity, but the party won't let them in.
No, it won't.
So you're going to get a turd that's dangling from the Republican string. That string is controlled by people's names you don't even know. Democrats, same thing. There's some people up there whose names you don't even know that hold the string that holds the Democratic turd. So you're given a choice between turds. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. What do you get when you're done? A turd.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, if Trump or Cruz, either one run, that's who I'm voting for, and I'm hoping that they ran together. If they ran together, they could have 16 years of right on instead of, what we've had.
I know. We talked about that earlier, and they might, except here's the problem. There was a guy named Andrew Johnson. He followed Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was influential and kind of like Trump, but he couldn't get everything he wanted. But Johnson was overridden. His vetoes were overridden. He said, this is unconstitutional. They said, screw you, and passed the law anyway, and they were unconstitutional. And he laid out good arguments for their unconstitutionality. But when Trump gets in, let's assume Trump makes president, he will be able to enforce the border laws. But he's already talking about he's already talking about infringing gun rights, isn't he? Almost longer waiting periods and no assault weapons. Wait a minute, it says it shall not be infringed. Why does he assume that as the executive of this country, he's got a right that overrides the state's rights to determine what weapons they can have in that state? It shall not be infringed. That means it's left to the states. Look what's happening to Massey.
Well, it's not even it's not left to the state. It's left to the individual. It's left to the American.
It's in your state constitution. Read your state constitution. It's got every state has a equivalent to the Second Amendment that, in many cases, at the option of the people of that state, by ratifying that amendment, ratifying that equivalent to the Second Amendment, has put qualifiers on it. Texas has one, and I think, if I remember correctly, except in cases for the protection of the public or something like that. But read your equivalent. Federal law in 1812, I think it was, Barron versus Baltimore, they made it very clear. And this is where we've got a problem. Why was there an objection? All the states had constitutions, except Rhode Island and Connecticut. They were still operating under the charge, or maybe it was Maryland and Connecticut were operating under the charters. But states had constitutions before we had a constitution. We had the Articles of Confederation ratified in 1781, but we didn't have a constitution until 1789. Now, that constitution, the objections to it, if you read the Anti-Federalist Papers, they don't want to give the federal government authority. So the federal government is barred from infringing on gun rights, period. That
exactly, and that
doesn't say the states are barred. It only says the federal government. They were concerned with the concentration of power in a single body, a king, so to speak. Every state, the people of that state, ratified their constitution consistent with their desires. And if they put a limit on the right of ownership of firearms, they put a limit on they chose to impose that on themselves. Not the federal government can't, the state can. If I'm wrong, why do all?
No, you're not.
Okay, why
you're
do
not.
State constitutions? A lot of them have qualifiers on them.
Yes, they do.
So,
the Texas State Constitution keeps the same qualifiers on it as the Second Amendment. Shall not be infringed, and unless you're you've been convicted of a heinous crime, and usually those folks didn't last long enough to live anyway.
That's the qualifier.
And that was it.
Let's see if I can find the Texas Constitution real quick. But
when you get the conviction,
people think the federal government is the end-all catch-all. Roe versus Wade. Everybody wants to overturn Roe versus Wade. What they really want is to say the Supreme Court has the authority over all the states, when they don't.
And they don't.
Limited federal authority
and that's why the state of Texas is coming back on them with this homosexual marriage thing and going, well, that's okay for that in that state in that one instance, but that ain't here. And that's why our governor had went and said, if our county courthouses, if the county clerks don't want to do it, if they have an objection to doing it, they don't have to do it.
Right,
and one lady
they go to court and we'll see what happens when it does.
Yeah, one lady here, she God bless her, she's a Christian woman. She says, I can't do that. I'm going to resign because I don't want to stand in somebody else's way of their happiness and stuff. But I can't do that. I won't do it, and I resign. And all of her folks in that clerk's office said, nah, I don't want the job neither. So, and now it's going to come back to states getting completely out of the marriage license business, which they never should have been in the first place. And that a marriage was between a man and a woman in church. And that, and if not in church, then before God, they stood out there in a field somewhere and said, I take you for my wife and I take you for my husband. And that was it, said and done.
Well, we carried over some ideals of British common law, and marriage was always sanctified. That way it could be defended legally.
Yes.
New Jersey required a declaration be published in a newspaper if you were going to get married. Pennsylvania did. This is back in colonial times. But the use of marriage licenses like we have now began in the early part of the last century, the early 1900s. But it got a lot of in the what do they call them? The flappers, the dancers.
No, the suffragettes. So it's the suffragettes. They came out and women were no longer considered chattel, a man's chattel. And when women.
You're way off on that.
Really?
I'm talking about marriage licenses.
Okay.
Marriage licenses really got their strength. I mean, my first wife's parents were married by certificate. They have a marriage certificate, no license, just a certificate from the church. And it's the sanction of God. But some states required that they be registered, which makes sense because, for genealogy, who your grandparents were and all that. And it was a public recognition that gave you legal status where you could sue for adultery and things like that. But then the syphilis in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s was going all over the country, so they started blood tests, and then they got hard on marriage licenses where you had to take a blood test. But if you look at marriage license in Black's Law Dictionary, let me see if I can find it real quick. It was the bar was against miscegenation. What's miscegenation?
More than one wife.
No.
No?
Marrying somebody of a different race.
Oh. That one.
Let's see, marriage first and then miscegenation. Marriage, M-A-R... It would have been easier to find it on my page on the internet. If you look at, go search verbicide, VERBICIDE. This is explained. Marriage license, a license or permission granted by public authority to persons who intend to intermarry. Usually addressed to the minister or magistrate who is to perform the ceremony in general terms to anyone authorized to solemnize marriages. By statute in most jurisdictions is made an essential prerequisite to the lawful solemnization of the marriage. So let's go to intermarry. That's the next word. See, a lot of times we don't think about those.
What's a legal word? Yeah.
Well, that's Black's Law Dictionary, and there's no case that they've cited that overturns it. Intermarriage. See miscegenation. Okay, let's go to miscegenation. Miscegenation, mixture of races. Marriage between persons of different races, as between a white person and a Negro. So the original marriage licenses were to avoid adulterating your race. But then with the syphilis and then requiring the blood test to determine if either of the parties had syphilis, where they had to tell the other party, they got everybody to get a marriage license. I'm married without a license right now. I don't have a license for my marriage. But the interesting thing is the strength, the expansion of the use of marriage licenses came as a consequence of disease. But now, if you go down and get your blood test and one of you's got AIDS, they can't tell the other party that you've got AIDS. So they flip-flopped, and that's how stupid government is. So, the Constitution, if you read it carefully, and draw a line through what doesn't work anymore, you ain't going to have much left. The Supreme Court has gone way beyond what Justice Marshall said in Marbury versus Madison in presupposing and determining lawfulness of the acts of Congress with regard to their feelings, rather than they become judicial activism. They have become legislators for every intent and purpose. They're not they didn't address the Constitution when they made the decision on queer marriages. There's nothing in the Constitution that can even be remotely applied to, one, them having jurisdiction over the matter, and two, any authority over the sanctity of marriage. Now, if you look in U.S. Code, see if I can find that real quick. This is about a month ago. I looked this up, and it was still the law of the land. And it's kind of interesting. The federal government, you'll find something interesting about it, too. It has nothing to do with marriage, per se. And, come on, this library. Okay, I'm getting there. Okay.
Are you still there? There it is.
Yeah, 1 U.S. Code, Section 7. This is still there a month ago. And you're going to find two things interesting about this. In determining the meaning of any act of Congress or of any ruling, regulation, or interpretation of the various administrative bureaus and agencies of the United States, the word marriage means only a legal union between one man and one woman as husband and wife, and the word spouse refers only to a person of the opposite sex who is a husband or a wife. Now, the two interesting things. They recognize in law, and I don't know how long that law has been on the books, 1 U.S. Code 7. marriage is between a man and a woman, and the spouse.
Isn't that the Defense of Marriage Act?
What?
Isn't that part of the Defense of Marriage Act?
No, that's been on the. This said, the same wording could be used in the Defense of Marriage Act, but this has been on the books for many decades. This probably goes back 50, 60 years at least, if not further.
Wow.
But the interesting thing, too, let's look at jurisdiction here. In determining the meaning of any act of Congress or of any ruling, regulation, or interpretation of the various administrative bureaus and agencies of the United States. They didn't say the states. They just said the government entities, the bureaus and agencies, act of Congress, ruling, regulation, or interpretation of the various administrative bureaus. So they didn't say anything about the states. Their jurisdiction did not go down to the states. So one, they say a marriage is between a man and a woman. And two, they say the extent of our authority in regards to marriage is federal agencies, acts of Congress.
And that's it.
And that's it. So how can that fucking court do what they're doing? So you were saying the Constitution is still working, right?
Praying it is. I'm hopeful it is. And I'm standing on faith that it will be again.
I am standing on faith that it will be again. That's all I'm standing on, because there is nothing else. We don't have a constitution in this country. Federal authority has gone where it doesn't belong. Has had. What does it mean? In commerce or out?
Absolutely.
I mean, see, it's gone. The only thing we've got is a show. It's called elections. But there's a one-party system with two factions. And they believe in more money for them, benefits to the corporate entities, the complexes, the military-industrial, the medical pharmaceutical, the banking, insurance, the government, and MSM, anything that makes them more money. And they're willing to pay to the congressman, to their re-election campaigns. Doesn't matter about us. Why are we giving freebies to foreigners but not to our own people?
Well, and here I'm looking at something that Donald Trump has just come out with. Donald Trump was correct to call for a revolution. The evidence of fraud by all three divisions of government.
See, now he's more along the line with me. I mean, there is no Constitution left except the charade of elections. And it's a charade.
And so whoever gets in that seat up there, and we can say, oh, well, we've got a republic. Well, whoever gets in that seat up there and decides, this is my will, this is what I'm going to enforce, this is what my enforcers are going to enforce, we have a kingdom.
Unless Congress overrides him. They pass a law, he's got to abide by the law. He's got a hell of an obstacle. It's bigger than you think. He will be battling the court and the Congress if he gets elected.
At least he'll be in a driver's seat to where he will have some power.
He will have a degree of power. Is it enough to turn it around? How can he get us back to elections? How can he get us back to, he cannot legislate, therefore he cannot keep Congress from receiving tens of millions of dollars in their campaigns if they get a law enacted for a corporation. He can't change that. He can't change the election laws, the two-party system. There's nothing he can do in so many areas. He can only, let's go back to Waco. People said, Janet Reno, Bill Clinton should override Janet Reno. He can't. He can only fire Janet Reno and hire somebody that would call off the raid at Waco. I mean, his power is limited as far as firing and hiring.
Well, I mean, look at Jay Johnson that's in there now. You know, I mean, if he's going to follow along with what Obama wants, you know, and if he doesn't, he's going to replace him with somebody that will.
Right, and that's how it works. Now, if Trump does that, though, there's going to be a lot of unemployed people, and they will have lifetime salaries, by the way. And can he find the people that will do it right? And when they get in and do it right, will they be influenced otherwise to do it wrong again? And how long is it going to take? So, well, isn't that the elusive phantom of hope? Now, let's say we start a revolution. We start fighting back now.